Outer Limits magazine presents a fourth encounter. A fourth encounter. On the 7th and 8th of May, 2022. Featuring the following speakers: Peter Robbins, Malcolm Robinson, Paul Sinclair, Jennifer Stein, Philip Kinsella, Ronald Kinsella, Paul Askoff, Mike Koffel, Sasha Christie, Steve Midgley, Colin Saunders, and your host from Outer Limits magazine, Chris Evers. Featuring previously advertised speakers. Please note, we shall endeavor to include all advertised speakers at this event. But, if government guidelines prohibit their travel and attendance, we shall run the event with a full list of only UK-based speakers. Also note that you may be required to prove your vaccination status to enter the building and attend. We will follow government guidelines. Therefore, it is recommended to check the OLM website on a regular basis, where tickets can also be purchased. We look forward to seeing you at our A Fourth Encounter event. Inside Outer Limits is a regular feature on the Paranormal UK radio network. Neither Chris Evers, Philip Mantle, Inside Outer Limits radio show, Flying Disc Press or Outer Limits magazine endorse any of the products you may have heard advertised at the beginning, the end, or inserted into the middle of this show. The only products we do endorse are those that are strictly affiliated to Outer Limits magazine, or Flying Disc Press. We now hope you enjoy the show. Thank you.
Hello everybody once more, and welcome to what is a very special Inside Outer Limits radio show with myself, Chris Evers, the man from Outer Limits magazine, and my good friend and colleague, Mr. Philip Mantle. Hi Phil.
Good evening, Chris. Nice to speak to you, mate.
You too. You notice then I didn't say, the original Prince Philip or UFO royalty or anything like that.
No, but I knew it had come at some point.
No, I was being respectful, mate. Being respectful.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because One of the guests we've had on the show, the man who led the team that faked the alien autopsy,
Yeah.
is Spiros Morales. Now, finally, after many setbacks, it looks like Spiros's long-awaited book is about to come out. And I wrote the foreword for it, and underneath my picture is Philip Mantle, so-and-so, and UFO royalty. So,
I've actually got it out there then at long last.
It's even now in popular culture, mate. So, and he sent me the picture of it a couple of days ago, and I looked at it and laughed. You know what I mean? So
I bet you believe
there
me,
you go.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Oh dear. Now, we've mentioned, well, I mentioned a few moments ago that this is a bit of a special show, and there is a reason for that. I mean, would you like to explain that, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, for those who are not aware, I've been plagued with serious ill health issues since 1999. I'm not looking for any sympathy. At that point, in August 1999, I had a near fatal heart attack, and I was in and out of hospital for quite some time. In 2009, I then went down with heart failure, and in 2010, to help me with that, I had a pacemaker with a defib fitted. And then in 2016, I had an attack at home called cardiac arrhythmia, and it was only the fact that I had a defib in my pacemaker that fired that day, and it saved my bacon. So I think since 1999, I lost count, Chris, to be honest. I've had over 40 emergency admissions into hospital. And of course, I wrote for Outer Limits magazine at the 2016 incident. I even had a near-death experience, even though I didn't actually die. I was still fully conscious. So, with having a little bout of ill health again just recently, I thought, something's going to have to give, because I hate committing myself to things and then not being able to do it, Chris. Mm-hmm. And we've managed for I don't know how long we've done this now.
I think we've been doing this about three and a half years, Phil.
Yeah, and so I can't tell when I'm going to be ill. I can't plan it. It just happens, and I hate letting people down. So the first thing that I thought was on my agenda was this, and I told you as soon as I made my mind up that this was going to have to come to an end. Mm-hmm. And here it is. This is the last one. So that's where we are. I mean, my mental health problems are known to some people, but not well known to everybody. So that there's nothing else behind it. It is just that. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the reasons why you don't see me on the lecture circuit, Chris. I mean, I struggle travelling anyway, but it's not that. That's not the main issue. It's the fact is, if I book to speak at a conference on X date, I don't know if I'm going to be well enough.
Yeah.
And I don't want to let people down, so I just pretty much stopped lecturing. That's it.
Yeah. Well, I will say that, I mean, obviously, I've always been aware that Inside Outer Limits radio show with myself and you could come to an end because of these health conditions. I mean, let's make it clear here. We haven't fallen out. There's been no bickering, no arguments or anything like that. It's purely health conditions that have interfered.
Absolutely. Yeah, nothing else. I mean, you've got your own medical problems.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Apart from your face, you've got other things that cause you concern.
Oh dear, you're going to have a bruised nose in a minute, mate. No, it is health conditions. Unfortunately, the older we get, the worse our health conditions do become. It's just a part of having these conditions and a part of getting older, basically.
Yeah, and added to this, as we've discussed, I have a modest archive of UFO materials, we'll call them here at my home. These contain UFO sighting reports that either myself or me and colleagues investigated. I've got close encounter case files when I was researching some of my books. I've got official documents from different parts of the world. Alien autopsy stuff coming out of my ears, of course. Even Russian case reports, because
That's you and Paul Stonehill.
me and Paul Stonehill have worked on things in Russia. I even found, believe it or not, a box of 3.5-inch floppy disks.
My God, what's a floppy disk? My grandma told me about them.
Yeah, and of course, I sent to you, I scanned it. I had several hundred photographs, mainly of UFO researchers. I scanned all those in. You've got a copy. But I've also got a collection of 35mm slides. I've no idea what's on most of them, to be honest. There's hundreds of the buggers. And then I've got other boxes of MUFON symposium proceedings and magazines. Some of the old magazines that were hand produced at various UFO groups, and other stuff, Chris, in boxes that I've long since forgotten. So what we've had this discussion with me and you've talked about it. I've talked about it with other colleagues. That the one thing we don't have here in the UK is an archive that's linked to an establishment that's not going to disappear, where we could house these archives, have them digitized, and have them made publicly available as well. There just isn't anywhere or anyone to take up that cudgel, if you like. So again, with my health issues at the forefront of my mind, I contacted David Marler, who lives in Albuquerque. David runs he has an archive called the David Marler UFO Historical Archive. He's the official archivist for the Center for UFO Studies, for example. So all their files are there. He's got all the Blue Book files, got all Helen Inex, NICAP, other UFO groups that I'd never heard of. Plus he's got individual researchers' material. Magazine. You name it, it's there by the thousand. But David also, he literally built an extension on his house, Chris, to house it. That's serious commitment. But David also has a written agreement with the University of New Mexico that when either he's too old or passes on, all of the archive will be housed by the university in perpetuity. That was a new word I learned with all this. Perpetuity. I kind of figured out what it meant, but I had to look it up, if I'm perfectly honest. And they'll carry on the digitisation.
A long time, Phil. Took a long time, it means.
So and it will be public accessible. It will be part of their historical section at the university. So it has a plan. Does David's archive? It's not just this looks great and I'm collecting it forever. So once it's done with, it will move on and be looked after, and my little collection will be in there with it. There are other places, of course. I'm not going to say David's is any better than anyone's or any worse. All I would say to anyone that has an amount of material, that they do think about what's going to happen to it. Because John Hanson, for example, has done an amazing job. Making sure things don't go. He's probably got the largest collection in the UK. You've got the AFU in Sweden, again, who've done an amazing job. So all I would say is, don't sit on it till the last minute. Either make your loved ones aware of where it's to go, or write it in your will. I've got my own little book collection, and I've got a good friend called Terry Jones. Me and Terry's been mates since the 80s. He's destined to get my books, and I think he keeps checking the obituary columns in the local papers, to see if he can start and find room for them. And as some people know, I collect UFO objet d'art.
Knickknacks.
And what will happen to them, I don't know. That'll be down to the wife and kids to sort out. They're of the least importance.
We did speak before we before we went live, shall we say. And let's make it clear here, Phil. These items are your items, the things that you've collected, you've investigated, you've
Yep.
taken your own personal funds and and gone after these reports and these stories and so on. So at the end of the day, it is up to you, what happens to them, But as I mentioned to you, it is such a shame that they are going out of the UK because there is no archive to actually to store them where they can be
Yeah, I
publicly
mean,
accessed.
yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about it for years, Chris, and I even kept bringing the subject up in the hope that some of the I don't know where they are, the younger ones might take that idea up and think, oh, that's a good idea. Maybe I'll start at the top. I don't know. Ask the British Library and work your way down. But nothing happened,
Yeah,
and you can only wait for so long.
yeah,
And I mean, with my illness, I could. It's not been grim or anything like that, but I could literally be dead tomorrow.
yeah,
And it's okay telling my wife, where to house things when I'm gone, but no respect to my wife, Christine. She's no interest in the subject,
yeah, yeah,
and doesn't know the people necessarily that I'm dealing with.
yeah,
So I thought, well, I best just, you know, grasp the nettle and get on with it. Because
yeah,
again, if I pass them on to you, for example, and then in a few years' time you think, well, I can't handle this anymore. I've had enough. You pass them on to Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith to Mr. At some point down that road, Chris, they're going to face the same dilemma.
yeah,
So, I've decided not to let that happen. I have an opportunity for my modest collection to be housed, looked after. They will be digitized at some point. And I kind of like the idea that, when I'm dead and gone, there might be some young dude in Albuquerque goes to the university and thinks, oh, look, Philip Mantle, I read his books 10 years ago, and here's his stuff,
yeah,
But, it is a shame we don't have one here, but we just have to be honest and say there isn't one, and there is no sign of one appearing on the horizon.
yeah. It's such a shame. It really is. I mean, it's really, like this show, Phil. I mean, you actually originally said to me, when you made the announcement to me, about 3 weeks ago now, I think, that you actually said, you're going to have to call it a day, but you would kindly stay on until I could get somebody to replace you. And I actually said to you, I may have said to you, I can't remember now actually, that I would find it very difficult to find somebody, to find another Philip Mantle who could replace the Philip Mantle. If I mean, no disrespect meant to any of our other colleagues, we all know, I mean, there's people like Paul Sinclair, Malcolm Robinson, even John Anson and other people, that could probably step in, but at the end of the day, they're not Philip Mantle. Do you know what I mean? With the knowledge that he's got and the same persona that I get on very well with, you know what I mean? So
Yeah. None of them originate from East Ardsley.
no, none of them are a daft lad from East Ardsley, yeah.
Yeah. None of them originate in East Ardsley. So,
But
they're starting from a bad position already, aren't they? You know what I mean?
but this is why we have decided to make this one the last show that we do together as the Inside Out Limits radio show. I mean, I'm not saying that at some point in the future me and Philip won't be on a show together, because I am going to be carrying on doing what I'm doing, and I'll make a little announcement about that towards the end of the show. And there's nothing to say that I'm not going to end up interviewing Philip at some point about this, that, or his favourite topic, the alien autopsy. So at the end of the day, it isn't a complete ending for us both, because we're still going to work together. And I understand, Phil, you're still going to provide articles for Outer Limits magazine when you can.
Yeah. I mean, nothing else has changed, Chris. I am literally, still working on publishing books for next year. I think I'm up to about 8 for next year already, when I only planned for 6.
Yeah.
So it shows you what kind of planner I am. Not very good. And I may even end up with more than 8. But
I think knowing you, Phil, I think that's very likely.
Yeah, so nothing else, in that respect has changed. I will still collect the memorabilia like I do. In fact, I've got my eye on a couple of pieces now. I've just got to wait while the wife's out of the way. But
Send it to shop, mate.
I actually had her putting some up on the wall for me yesterday, so I can't say much. Um, so, nothing else in that respect has changed, because when it comes to the books, I make it quite clear to the various authors that when I say it's a publication day, it's very relaxed.
Mhm.
If they want to change it, we can change it. Similarly, if I want to change it, Um, so even though we have a contract, it's not in tablets of stone.
Yeah,
We just take it very easy. They've got the contract there that protects us both legally, of
yeah,
course. But if they ring up or they send me an email saying, Philip, I want to go somewhere else, it's no problem. There's no fallout. And so everything else stays the same. I'm still working on things that I was, and like I said, things still come my way, and when they do, they'll end up in Outer Limits magazine at some point.
excellent. That's excellent to know. Now, as we mentioned a few moments ago, Phil, we have been doing this for about 3.5 years, and I do know the people over at the Paranormal UK Radio Network, Irene Allen, Andy Mercer, Mark Johnson, they've all expressed the sadness, really, that the show is coming to an end, and they wanted me to let you know how grateful they have been for your involvement with this, as have I. So I'm just passing that on to you, Phil.
That's very nice of them, then. Thank you very much, guys. But it's been a pleasure. It really has.
Yeah, it is something that we've really enjoyed, isn't it, Phil?
Well, I wouldn't do it otherwise,
Yeah.
Chris. I get a lot of enjoyment out of what I do. I work hard on someone's book, and I may moan and groan at some point, but when it's finished and I have a copy in my hand,
Hmm.
I'm as happy as Larry.
Yeah.
And it's same with this, our little podcast. Okay, this is not coast to coast. We haven't got 50 zillion listeners, but we weren't doing it for that. And it'd be nice if we did, but we weren't doing it for that. And even if we did, Chris, this decision will still have been
Yeah.
made.
Yeah.
Nothing would have changed that whatsoever.
Well, I'm going to tell you something now, Phil, that may pleasantly surprise you. I was speaking with Irene Allen quite recently, and I asked her how many downloads they'd had for our show on a particular show. I think it was the Donald Schmidt one, and she couldn't give me a direct answer for that, but she did say that they'd been in the region of 275,000 downloads
That's not bad, is
for,
it?
not just for us, for the full network over a period of
No, that was
months.
just us, Chris. That was just us.
Yeah, we can think that bit. But I mean that is not bad, that really, is it, when you think about it?
No, because we're not in competition with
No,
anybody.
no.
We're not blowing our own trumpets. It's just something we've done because we enjoyed it,
Yeah,
and we hope that there's a handful of people out there that enjoy it as well.
yeah.
And I'm happy to hear that you will continue on in some capacity.
Yes, as I said, at first I was a little bit, oh God, well, that's it then, no more, no more Inside Outer Limits radio show. But Irene spoke to me, Irene Allen, who's the CEO of Paranormal UK Radio Network. She spoke to me and she said, look, you have been one of the most successful shows and one of the longest shows that we've had. It would be such a shame for you to cut all ties and just leave. So she said, will you think about doing something else? So I took a short while and I had a little think, and I thought, what can I do? What can I do that is different but slightly, the same, talking about the subjects that we do get involved with, but looking at them more differently. I just didn't want to do what everybody else was doing. I just didn't want to be another number or another council house built on the same block looking like all the rest of the houses. So what I've decided to do is a show once a month, which will be a bit of a special, and it will be called Paranormal Panorama. And the key word there is panorama. It'll be more investigative, similar to the BBC TV show of the same name, Panorama, if I can get the words out. That's going to be a tongue twister, Phil, as the weeks go by. Yeah. And I want to do more in-depth investigations of events, and I am currently working on one at the moment which will be going out round about the beginning of November. So I'm looking to get the next show out round about then, and it's a topic that we're all familiar with, but perhaps we're not deeply familiar with it. It involves events locally in the Yorkshire area, but that's all I'm going to say about it now, because I'm going to be investigating it a little bit more. I'm going to be getting out there and doing on-site interviews with people and so on.
Well, good luck, mate. That's all I can say is good luck, and I will tune in on occasion. That's about the best I can say at the moment.
That's perfectly fine, Phil. That's perfectly fine. Thank you very much for that. Now, over the years we've been doing this then, Phil, we've interviewed quite a number of people, as I mentioned a moment ago, Don Schmidt. We've had David Marler on, who you've already mentioned. Who else have we had? Who have you been interested in?
Well, I think we've had I think one of the good things about what we've tried to do is diversify.
Yeah.
And for example, we had Charlie Parrish on, who's a filmmaker he's a Brit, but he's living in Los Angeles, and I think we're the only one that Charlie has talked about. He's got a project that is ongoing to make a major documentary about Dr. David Jacobs and his work on the abduction side of things.
Yeah.
And he has access to David's and Bud Hopkins' complete archive.
Yeah.
And so that people like that. We've also spoken to witnesses, as well as people who got their own books to publish. I think one of the things that stands out for me in doing this is that you learn so much from listening to these people. You don't learn it from all of them, but there'll be little nuggets that come out every now and again that you'd no idea what was going on, and learn from it as a result. And I because I always have a pad in front of me. I always take notes when we're talking to people. And it's little things I write down to follow up on. I mean, that's interesting. I'll have a look at that, So I think it's the fact that we've always learnt something from our guests. I thought it was rather funny. I don't mean to pull him out, pick him out, but when we interviewed Ralph Blumenthal, who's written the biography about Dr. John Mack, he was. I don't know why, but he was stunned to learn that I'd actually met John Mack.
Yeah.
Maybe he was jealous.
I just think he was jealous, mate. Yeah, absolutely.
He never had, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, I met the late John Mack on several occasions, not just once, but little things like that. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
It's just my sense of humour, mate.
Absolutely. One of the ones that I've enjoyed speaking to, and we've had him on a number of times now, was Calvin Parker and his experiences.
Yes. I mean, a lot of people know I'm heavily involved with Calvin. Literally, just before speaking to you today, I've been working on the new book that will be coming out next year, all about the Pascagoula case. That's been co-authored between myself and Dr. Irene Scott, and it involves all the witnesses that have come forward. A lot of which we've been interviewed by myself, mostly by Dr. Scott, I've got to admit, and others by a chap by the name of Doug Wilson in the States. And because we knew of 2 or 3 in the past, Chris, so it includes them. But once Calvin stepped forward and wrote his own books, others then started to go on the record and say, well, I saw this that night, and I saw this, and I saw that. So, although Irena has her own book out on October the 1st of this year, and some of the witnesses are in that, Irena found out something else that happened that night and thinks it is linked, and I'll say no more than that. So rather than have these witnesses scattered across 4 or 5 different publications, they're all going into one.
Yeah.
And some of it is, archive material, for example, that I've accessed. For example, the sheriff who was involved at the time was Sheriff Fred Diamond. And he's the guy that interviewed Charlie and Calvin that night. Well, unfortunately, he's long since gone. But I got an audio recording, an interview with him in 1973. I think just the next day. This is the day after things had happened. So I've transcribed that, and that's in the book because it's relevant.
Yeah.
So it's not just the witnesses of the UFOs; it's also the witnesses to what went on. Again, a documentary that was made, and there's a chap whose name escapes me at the moment, but he worked at the X-ray department at the hospital, and he remembers Hickson and Parker being brought into the hospital because what we call A&E, their ER room was next to the X-ray department, and remembers them coming in, and he spoke to Calvin.
Yeah.
And even the news crews followed them into the hospital. They couldn't even get away from them in the hospital. And so he was talking to Calvin, and he didn't know what the hell was going on. Then we have Dr. Julius Bosco from the Singing River Hospital, who, examined both men.
Yeah.
And we've turned up some intriguing material. Now, both Calvin, I know we're digressing here, but I've opened my gob now. But just a matter of weeks back, I was sent black and white photographs of injuries on these two guys. And no one's ever seen these photographs before. And it says on the back, Charles Hickson's arm, Pascagoula, October 11th, 1973, etc. And in their own right, Chris, when you just look at them, they're just black and white photographs with people with marks on their arm.
Yeah.
But when you put them in context, then they become that more interesting. So it's information like that's also going in the book for the first time.
Yep.
Nobody's ever seen these. When the gentleman that sent me them found them, he wasn't looking for them. He was going through a file looking for something else. Yeah. And he assumed I'd already got them. But he thought, just in case, I'll send them to Philip. But anyway, so like I say, even though things are falling by the wayside, I'm still ongoing. And Calvin was a great guest as well.
Yeah, it was. I also enjoyed when we had Paul Hynek. We're talking with Calvin as well. That was very, very. The banter between them both was reminiscent of me and you to some extent, to be quite honest.
It was. They've become good friends.
Yeah.
And if you remember, we were talking about the Project Blue Book TV series with Paul, who'd worked on it as a consultant, I believe. And he was telling us then that they were also making arrangements for the 3rd series and the 4th series, and then it got cancelled.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but Paul is he's a nice guy. He was very worried because, for those that are not aware, Calvin's been seriously ill, and they do have a great repertoire between the two of them, and hopefully he'll stay involved. But it was nice to speak to him, and a lovely guy, because Calvin, of course, remembers ringing Dr. Hynek's house when Paul was only a youngster, and Paul used to answer the phone, and if there were any messages, I think they had a chalkboard, he would write them on the chalkboard. And of course Paul would say, "My father's not in," and Calvin would say, "Go and get him, I know he is."
Excellent. That's excellent. I mean, some of the other people we've spoken to as well, is it Roberto Pinotti from Italy, the Kinsella twins, they've all been fascinating and, absolutely a delight to interview. I'm sure you can think of other people as well, John Steiger, for example, was great as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to single people out, and we've spoken to the skeptical side of the community as well, with David Clark, David's an old friend of mine. He still gets a lot of stick, I think unnecessarily, but there you go. He's had that for a long time. He can handle it. And of course, we mentioned Spiros, so we've talked about the what really did happen behind the alien autopsy hoax. And
Hang on a minute. You mean it's not real?
It's not real, mate.
Oh
No.
God, no! That's it.
No, it's not real. So there may be a future guest for you, because his book is done.
Yes,
It is ready,
yes.
and it's just like everything. Life gets in the way, but it is ready, and you'll see my mugshot and UFO royalty in it as well.
That is funny. I love that. That is brilliant. So,
Well, it kind of reminds me, many years back, Chris, before the advent of email, I used to correspond with a chap in Brazil. I think he was called J. Victor Soares. I probably pronounced his surname wrong, but anyway, I also write, dear Victor, like you do with all that, dear sir, dear Matt, whatever. And he used to write back, and he used to call me Sir Philip and all this lot. And no matter how much I told him that I didn't have any title, he'd call me doctor as well. He used to call me doctor in these letters. And I used to explain, I don't have a doctorate. I'm not a doctorate. It didn't work, because if I said don't call me doctor, he would come up with something else next time. You know what I mean?
dear.
What's funny, when we mentioned about David Marlon and my stuff going through the archives, going to his archive, I should say, he was going through some stuff in the archive, and guess who there's a letter from?
Go on.
Philip Marley. So I'm already in there.
Oh dear me. Excellent.
And it's like I during the research on Calvin's case, I pestered everybody over and over again. But gentleman I used to know, who's now knocking on in years, is Dr. Leo Sprinkle, and he came and lectured at some of the conferences we did in Sheffield. But he's not online, so I had to write to him. And his archive is held at the University of Wyoming in Laramie or whatever. And I accessed his archive online, and guess who, there's letters in there from me as well.
Oh God.
Poor fella stays offline and he's still getting bothered.
Oh dear me.
It just shows you, where things turn up.
Yeah.
It's in the most unlikely places.
Yeah, absolutely.
I recently accessed online. It's the Journal of Cryptozoology. Never heard of it. And it's going through all these cases, most of which I have never heard. And with each case, it has a graphic, a drawing.
Yeah.
And hellfire, there's Pascagoula. And because Calvin and Charlie thought that these creatures they met were robotic in nature, they have actually drawn it as a robot.
Right.
Looking metallic.
Yeah.
It didn't look metallic at all, but so I thought I might stick that in the new book I'm doing next year, just to give, just as an example. But things crop up in the most unlikely places, they really do.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, you mentioned a few moments ago Dr. Irene Scott and her new book, which is coming out on the 1st of October. Do you want to give us the title of that, Phil, and where listeners can get it?
Yeah, it's simply called Beyond Pascagoula, The Rest of the Amazing Story. It will be on Amazon in Kindle, paperback, hardback, and hopefully audiobook as well. She tells the Pascagoula story. She tells the story of some of the new witnesses. But it was actually that night that she kind of got involved. This is October the 11th, 1973. Irene was living away from home because she was studying, I don't know if it was for her degree or for her PhD. I can't remember. And her mum phoned her. Bear in mind, this is the same night as the Pascagoula incident. And she said there's been this huge sonic boom.
Yeah.
So loud, it actually shattered one of the windows in their house in Ohio, where she lived. That's her mum.
Yeah.
And so Irina, using her scientific mind, looked into it, and this boom, this noise, was heard halfway across the United
Yeah.
States, and she cannot find a logical explanation for it.
Hmm.
And it registered on seismographs, but it wasn't an earthquake or anything like that. And she thinks it might be related because we have to remember, Pascagoula was like the epicenter of a whole range of sightings across the United
Hmm.
States, and it seemed to be a peak in October. Um, and she thinks that this may be related to
Yeah.
it. So she's gone to examine, various institutions, scientific papers, looked at how aircraft cause a sonic boom and how far away you can hear it. For example, aircraft that are higher altitude, if they create a sonic boom, then it doesn't travel as far because the atmosphere is thinner.
Yeah.
But normally, a normal sonic boom with an aircraft will be about 2 miles.
Hmm.
You can hear it for. This was heard hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles. She's even said it could have been the second loudest noise ever on Earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Next to the explosion of Krakatoa in 18 whatever.
Yeah.
You know.
I will have to say here, Phil, that I am quite aware of this because Irena has kindly supplied an article about this for the October the 1st issue of Outer Limits magazine, and it is a fascinating read. It really is.
Yeah, and the cracked window in her house where she now lives back home in Ohio is still there.
Wow.
So I said to Irene, well, I know it could be any cracked window, but just go and photograph it anyway, and we'll put it in the book. Which she did. But I think it was that incident that actually got her involved in things.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating story. It really is. And the reason why Irene interviewed a lot of the witnesses in the States is A, she's an academic.
Hmm.
B, I kept getting mixed up with the time difference between here and Mississippi or Alabama or whatever they were, and still do. I forget when we've changed the clocks and when we haven't changed the clocks. I wish they'd just leave them alone. But also some of these witnesses were ladies as well, and I think it's easier if you're phoned up by a stranger who happens to also to be female, rather than some strange sounding fellow from across the Atlantic with a funny accent.
Oh, I definitely got a funny accent, not like mine.
Yeah. So, no, not like the East Yorkshire twang. No. I spoke to this is a male after. I spoke to somebody in London and said, "Oh, I love your accent." I said, "What accent?" So we don't have one. It's you that has the accent, not us, not me. I don't have it.
Oh, brilliant.
And, yeah, kind of funny. And I worked for the for one of the major banks. After the heart attack, I lost my job. And eventually I had to go back to work. So I got a job working a call centre.
Yeah.
And for a few years I was on the telephones listening to, speaking to customers. And we used to have one down in Wales and one in Scotland. We didn't have any overseas. I remember this lady saying, "Oh, whereabouts are you, love?" I said, I'm in Leeds in West Yorkshire. She says, "No disrespect, but," she says, "when I speak to your colleagues in Scotland, I can't understand a word of them." And it reminded me of a UFO conference we went to in London many years back. And of course, Malcolm was there, Malcolm Robinson, who, a Scot through and through. And one of the lads was from Italy. And I said, "Can you understand us all?" He says, "I can understand everybody apart from that guy." And he pointed to Malcolm.
Well, there you go, Mr. Robinson.
Yeah.
Oh, dear me. Now, your new book that you're working on currently then, Phil, do you have a possible release date for that next year?
No, I mean it's got a working title of the Pascagoula close encounter, witnesses on the record.
Right,
That's a working title.
right.
The reason for that is that the book is being used as a template
Hmm.
for a three-part documentary series on the case,
Hmm.
and it is with the first draft is with the production company. And they will come back to me and say, we wish to interview him, her, and her that's featured in the book.
Yeah.
That's up to them who they want to speak to. Obviously Calvin and others. Um, but what we intend to do is to make the book and the documentary series the same title. So
It'll tie in, basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
they'll tie in. They may change it to fit me. More than likely, I'll change the title of the book to fit them.
Mm.
It's no big deal as far as I'm concerned.
Hmm.
And we've already begun, the first part of the work. I've been sending visuals down to them, audio files, some video. And were it not for COVID, Chris, it would have been made, last year.
Yeah.
Not. So one of the ideas they want that when they film you walking around the house, it's called B-roll. They'll film you doing ordinary things,
Yeah.
and then at some point when you're being interviewed, that'll be inserted,
Yeah.
and you'll be talking over it, B-roll. But it's pointless them employing somebody, to do B-roll. So what the next step will be is to send Calvin's wife Wayne a little video camera, just say film him. Walking about the house, making coffee, out going, cutting the grass, whatever it is he does. I know he's been ill, but he's still out, he's still active in that respect. So that's on the cards. And I just recently came across a little company that did some UFO animations.
Hmm.
I don't know how much they charge. I've put them in touch with the production company. They may already have their own animators in place.
Yeah.
Or they may not want to use animation. So there's a lot of things could still happen. For example, on the night in question, again, October the 11th, 1973, Charlie and Calvin were fishing on the east side of the Pascagoula River. On the other side of the river, at the same time, was the Mr. and Mrs. Blair.
Yeah.
They were waiting for a boat coming in because Mr. Blair worked in the fishing industry. And they saw the blue light opposite them. Mrs. Blair saw this grey creature in the water. Before he died, Mr. Blair admitted he'd seen the same thing. And he also claims that they may have had a close encounter themselves. They may well have had an abduction experience. Sadly, Mr. Blair passed away, but Mrs. Blair has asked, we didn't push this on her, she's asked if she could go under hypnosis.
Oh, right.
So we have a gentleman who lives not too far from her. I think it's only a 2 or 3 hour drive, who is a professional in this field. It's just that he's very busy. He spoke to Mrs. Blair last year, didn't think it was appropriate at that time because she was still grieving for the death of her husband, and she'd had to move house, and she needed to settle down basically and have time to grieve. And I was just corresponding with her the other day, and she still wants to have this done. So what I also got arranged, our friend and colleague in the UK, Jason Gleaves, is an excellent graphic artist.
Yeah.
Jason is working on with a chap called Martin Powell on a graphic novel based on the Pascagoula case. But I asked Jason if he could speak to Calvin and get some accurate illustrations. He's done that. And then I asked him if he would speak to Mrs. Blair and do the same. And he's done that. So there is a set of illustrations in the book based on her account. And we'll be publishing that for the first time. So there's a lot of things could still happen. We may be able to regress Mrs. Blair in the meantime, or the production company may do it. and they will pay for someone to do it. And they will, of course, with Mrs. Blair's permission, of course, film it. And so, and I believe there's others out there that may have some interesting material. Whether they can access it or not is a different matter. So, we're still working on it, mate. But these are things that are in the melting pot.
Now, a lot of people, investigators, researchers, etc., some of them do frown upon the idea of hypnotic regression, Phil. I mean, what's your personal belief?
I can understand that, mate. I have never personally used it. I've sat in as an observer, and it was interesting. This is a while back, and it was a professional psychologist that was hired to do the hypnosis. And you had one guy, he's actually featured in our book, Without Consent. And he had a period of missing time. And he was really up for it, Chris. I mean, the guy was really excited. And his story goes, he used to be a professional musician. He was working up in the northeast, driving home late in the morning, down the A1. I think he might have been a saxophonist, but he was a professional musician anyway. He saw this thing that looked like a rocket. If he saw one or two cars with their brake lights go on, and he looked to his right, there was a couple of houses, and this thing was literally going over the houses.
Yeah.
And then the next thing he remembers, he's home. And I know there's such a thing as highway hypnosis. I know that, but he put his instruments away. They weren't just dumped, and he couldn't figure it out. And when he was regressed, he remembered nothing. I mean, he just recounted what he'd already said. We had another chap, I can't remember his name or where he came from. He was the opposite. He was very quiet, very calm, very relaxed. And he was the opposite. When he was regressed, he came out with a whole, long story of what may have happened to him that evening. So, like I say, Mrs. Blair hasn't been forced to do this. She knows that Calvin underwent hypnosis, you see, so she thinks she wants to do the same. So who am I to object?
Let's hope it does bring an answer to questions, really.
Well, all I can do is try and point her in the right direction of somebody professional, and that I've done that. And for example, when the gentleman phoned her, and he didn't think she was in a fit state to be doing anything. Were he a charlatan, Chris, he could have said, right, and he's doing it off his own back. We're not paying him. And he explained that, he may go and speak to Mrs. Blair and then decide not to do it, that it won't benefit her from a medical point of view. So that's the way I look at it, Chris. I keep an open mind on it. Having said that, on the night in question again, Calvin and Charlie are driving up to the fishing spot, and they pass another car that's parked up. There is a courting couple in this car. Calvin, afterwards, can remember the make, model, colour, the lot about this car, but not the number plate. So when he was hypnotised by no less than Bud Hopkins, he remembered the number plate. And not only did he remember the number plate, because he went under regression for the first time in 1993. So it's 20 years after the event. What he did, he hired a private detective to try and find out who owned that car in October 1973. And this fella did. The man who'd been driving the car had since passed away, but the lady was still alive. And Calvin knows her name. She's now in a nursing home, apparently, because she's in the twilight of her days, so to speak. But nonetheless, he could remember the the number plate only under hypnosis. He
Yep.
now remembers it. We have it written down. It's in the book. It's in Calvin's book.
Yeah.
And so make of that what you will.
Fascinating stuff, mate. Absolutely. Now, talking of Calvin, as you mentioned, he has had some health problems, and I think they may still be ongoing. But can you give us an update?
Yeah, I mean, Calvin was diagnosed with cancer of the kidney. He had a major operation, and he's also been going through, chemo, and looks like he's winning the battle.
Good.
The doctor, he says he's getting stronger every day. He told me he was bored, so that's always a good sign. He'd been to see the doctor, and it was the cancer was shrinking.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed. Looks like the old boy's going to be around for a good bit longer, which I'm extremely happy to hear.
Yeah,
of course.
Absolutely.
And then where they live, of course, is right on the Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
So he's just managed to dodge the latest hurricane.
That's Ida, if I remember correctly.
Hurricane. Why do they always name them after women, Chris?
Well, I must say something about females.
I
Right,
know,
I'll close the door on the way out, Phil.
Yeah. So he managed to dodge that, thankfully. But so we just want to get these things done and out of the way while we can.
Yeah.
And Calvin's a prime example. Like I said, Martin Powell and Jason Gleaves are working on a graphic novel. I would say is about half done.
Yeah.
So it looks great. I'm biased, I know. We have a 5-part drama series screenplay written, and the producer's trying to get someone to commit to coughing up the money to make it.
Yeah.
That will, and of course the documentary series. It will be a 3-part series.
Yeah.
I might have a little bet that it might go to 4 parts, but that's just me. But there you go. So things are still happening. I'm still working on these things, and one thing I'll let you into that nobody else knows, because it only happened last week.
Well, don't worry, Phil. Nobody's listening.
Yeah, 270,000 downloads, mate. They're all going to tune in for this last one. Calvin's just signed up a little merchandise deal, so you'll be able to buy posters, trading cards, etc., with images of his close encounter on it. Some of it will be signed, some of it won't. And that should be out by October.
That's
And
excellent.
it's something we always talked about, because I collect this stuff.
Yeah.
So, it's something I like as well, but the agreement has just been signed. And people will turn their nose up it, but we have to remember in Calvin and a lot of people's circumstances in the States, they don't have a national health service like we do.
No.
And Calvin has had a lot of medical bills to pay. So if there's any way I can find him a little bit of income, then I'm going to do it. And if people don't like it, well, it's just tough. The agreement that Calvin and I have with regards to his 2 books, we share the royalties. But as soon as he took seriously ill, I said, no, we won't share the royalties anymore. They're all yours, Calvin. He protested. I said, you can protest as much as you like. I'm just going to send you the money anyway. So,
I don't know. That's. I mean, I've got to say, Phil, that's very, very kind of you to do that. And I'm sure Calvin appreciates it definitely. And it just shows really the kind of person that you are.
Well, Calvin's a friend now. Although we've never met in person, he is a friend. And I'd like to think if I were in need, some of my friends might do the same for me.
Yeah.
And it's only money at the end of the day. He needed it, I didn't, so it just made sense as well, and he is very grateful. And if anybody else out there wants to contribute, you can donate some money to him, or just buy a book.
Yeah.
Just buy one of his books, and all the profits from that book will go to Calvin, every penny. I can assure you.
Absolutely. Well, Phil, we've literally got about 5 minutes left. So, is there anything you want to add, or anything else you'd like to say?
No, you know, Chris, you know, nothing will change on the surface. I'll still be pestering you.
Oh God.
I'll still be. What I will do, I'll write a little piece for you and explain to your readers, Chris, what I'm doing with my little collection of stuff and where it's going and why, so they understand. And remind them as well that if they've got anything, to please not leave it until the last minute. We don't want it going to landfill. You know, I've seen it happen, and it's, you know, if we can avoid it at any, you know, at any cost, then we should do. But if somebody might come up with a bright idea in the meantime of you know, of establishing an archive here, it's going to be, I don't know, late next year, I would think, Chris, before I've finally got all this sorted out. So it's not going anywhere in the short term, I can assure you.
Okie dokie.
So we shall see.
If we can get together as a community, and a British community, you know, and get this sorted out, and it's something worth considering, absolutely. Such a shame for it to go abroad, really.
Yeah, if my stuff is gone and this happens afterwards, well, you know, that's just the way it goes. It would be a bit lovely to have such an establishment. I don't know why we haven't got a UFO museum. The only one I know is in, well, there's two or three that I know. There's one in Roswell, of course. There's one actually in Fukushima in Japan, Chris, of all places. That's not going to last long, is it? And there is another one in Italy, I believe, that's not long since been opened. But, you know, here we are. We're supposed to be one of the richest nations on Earth. Surely somebody out there has got some coffers for this, surely.
We talked about a number of years ago a place in Blackpool. What happened to that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I was actually hired in the 1990s to help a company design a UFO museum and tourist attraction. And I did. And the papers for it are probably still in my files here. And they actually put a bid in on a building in Bournemouth, believe it or not. They had £6 million, which was a lot of money. The only thing they couldn't afford to do was to buy a building. They had to lease one. And they found some place in Bournemouth, and it was council owned, so they had to do a presentation to the council. I think there was 6 companies chasing it. I think it ended up as a bowling alley, Chris.
Right.
And they even had one of the designers on board who designed the rides for Disney. The idea was, you open the door, you go in, you sit down, you go for a ride on a flying saucer first, and then you out the other end, and then there's the museum and research. They had a research centre built into it as well, and that project bit the dust. They moved on to the next one. They got money to invest. I don't know what they've invested in next. Maybe I don't know, but it was on the table, but it never came off.
Such a shame.
So there you
Such
go.
a shame.
Yeah, never mind.
Well, Phil, all I can say is thank you for the last 3.5 years that we've done this. It's been fun. We've had a good laugh. We've learnt quite a lot. And hopefully we've informed quite a lot of people as well.
Yeah, I'm sure we have.
So thank you. And
my pleasure, mate. My pleasure.
It's time to say goodbye. So goodbye, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Do keep an eye open for the Paranormal Panorama. Got it out that time, Phil, without getting tripped up.
Keep an eye on it, because it's going to take him for a while just to learn how to pronounce it.
Yeah, it's going to take me 8 weeks to learn how to pronounce it.
Paranormal Panorama.
Oh, behave. Good night, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Over the years that both Philip and Chris have presented this podcast, they have interviewed many known, and one or two lesser known personalities within the UFO community, and associated areas of interest. In fact, there are far too many to name all of them individually. That would take up another show altogether. Philip and Chris wish to let each and everyone know that it was their individual contributions to the Inside Outer Limits radio show that made the podcast unique, enjoyable and interesting, not just for the presenters but to the listeners also. They could not have made the podcast without your special input. So, to each and every one of those contributors, a massive thank you. Podcasts are though nothing without listeners, and we know many of you took time out of your schedule to listen to, or to download the show. Thank you for doing so. While the Inside Outer Limits radio show is now history and can still be accessed on sites such as Spreaker, it doesn't mean that Chris's contribution is over. Keep your ears and eyes open for an announcement regarding the start of his new docucast, Paranormal Panorama, to begin in November 2021. Once again, thanks for listening in, and goodbye from the Inside Outer Limits radio show. Both Philip and Chris wish each of you well, and thanks once more for being with us.